the curious bobcat and the cardboard box. Needle-strewn earth muffled Rusty's pores as he ventured farther than prudence usually allowed. The comforting perfume of pine and damp soil yielded to an astringent odor, a biting unfamiliarity that made his nose twitch. Amber eyes narrowed. He crept toward the forest's edge. Mother's warnings echoed in his mind. The two-legged's world, a realm of thunderous beasts and capricious peril. Yet, the allure of the unknown, a potent cocktail of apprehension and fascination, spurred him onward. A grey scar bisected the trees, the two-legged's path. A persistent, low thrum vibrated through the ground, tickling his whiskers. Flattening himself amidst the ferns, his mottled coat dissolving into shadow, he risked a peek. Colossal metal forms, dwarfing any buck he'd encountered, blurred past, each emitting a guttural roar like a disgruntled bear. On the verge of retreat, his resolve crumbling, he spotted it, a large, rectangular thing abandoned near the path's edge. Brown and flattened, adorned with curious dark symbols, it was utterly alien. Hesitation warred with an irresistible curiosity. He dashed across the opening during a lull in the mechanical torrent. The object proved to be crafted from a peculiar, paper-like substance. He sniffed cautiously. It smelled of nothing. Circling it, his tail flicked with nervous energy. Then he heard it, a fragile whimper, like a wounded sparrow. Rusty went rigid, ears perked, attempting to locate the sound's origin. It emanated from within the brown container. He approached gingerly, heart hammering against his ribs. A tentative nudge. The whimpering intensified. Claws scraped at the material, tearing a small gap. Inside, too wide, brown eyes stared back, brimming with fear and bewilderment. A tiny, furry creature, smaller than a rabbit, trembled within the box's confines. It defied categorization. Not squirrel, not rabbit, nothing familiar. Another pathetic whimper, a sound that tugged at something deep within him. A wave of protectiveness washed over Rusty, a sentiment usually reserved for his littermates. He ripped at the cardboard with renewed fervor, creating a wider aperture. Emboldened by the light and Rusty's presence, the creature crawled towards the opening. Short, brown fur covered its diminutive frame. A long, pliant tail trailed behind. As it emerged, Rusty recognized it, a pup, but of no breed he knew. The pup wobbled out, its legs unsteady and weak. It gazed up at Rusty, a tentative wag of its tail the only greeting. A soft yip escaped its throat before it collapsed onto its paws, utterly drained. Rusty nudged the pup gently. So small, so helpless. Abandoning it to the dangers of the two-legged's path was unthinkable. A decision hardened within him, as resolute as the ancient oaks surrounding him. He would care for it. He would shield it. Lowering his head, he nudged the pup towards the sanctuary of the woods. "Come," he seemed to say. "Let's find you safety." Pip's new beginning. The cardboard box smelled of stale rain and fear. Rusty circled it, the scent of something small and vulnerable making his whiskers twitch. He lowered his head, peering inside. Two dark eyes, wide with terror, stared back. A puppy. Someone had simply left it here, on the edge of the roaring road. Rusty nudged the box with his nose. It wobbled precariously. He nudged it again, harder this time, until the box tipped, spilling the puppy onto the damp earth. The tiny creature yelped, scrambling back into the flattened cardboard. Rusty whined softly, a sound he usually reserved for calling his mother. He didn't want to frighten it, but he couldn't leave it here. He crouched low, extending a paw towards the puppy. It flinched, but didn't bite. Emboldened, Rusty gently hooked his claws under the scruff of its neck, lifting the puppy clear of the box. It was surprisingly light, all trembling bones and soft, dusty fur. "It's all right," a Rusty murmured, though he doubted the puppy understood. He carried it away from the road, the rumble of passing wagons fading behind them. He set the puppy down in a patch of sun-dappled grass. "Come on," he urged, nudging it forward with his nose. The puppy stumbled, its legs wobbly. Rusty walked slowly, letting it keep pace. Every few steps, the puppy would stop, overwhelmed by the new smells and sights. He named him Pip, a quiet name for a quiet creature. The journey back to their den seemed longer with Pip in tow. He yipped with every step, but he kept following Rusty closely, his dark eyes fixed on the Bobcat's every move. The setting sun cast long shadows, making the forest seem both magical and menacing. Finally, they reached the familiar scent of home. Rusty pushed through the dense undergrowth, Pip struggling to keep up. Willow was waiting for them, her amber eyes filled with concern. "Rusty? What have you got there?" she asked, her voice soft. Rusty stepped aside, revealing Pip huddled behind him, shivering. Willow approached cautiously, sniffing the air. Her expression softened. "He's just a baby," as she murmured, nudging Pip gently with her nose. Pip whined, but didn't run. "Can we keep him, Mama?" He was all alone, Rusty pleaded, his voice full of hope. Willow looked from Rusty's earnest face to the trembling puppy. She sighed, a sound that held both weariness and acceptance. "He's welcome here, Rusty," as she said, her voice warm. "Welcome home, Pip." Willow's decision. The scent hit Willow first, a sharp, unfamiliar tang that mingled with the usual earthy aroma of their den. Then she saw them. Rusty, practically vibrating with nervous energy, stood just inside the entrance, his young body shielding something small and trembling. "Rusty? What is this?" Willow asked, her voice a low rumble. Rusty shuffled his paws, his gaze darting between her and the bundle at his feet. I found him, Mama." He was all alone. He stepped aside, revealing a creature unlike anything Willow had ever encountered. It was small, covered in patchy brown fur, and its tail thumped weakly against the dirt floor. Two wide, pleading eyes stared up at her. A dog. A pup. Surprise rippled through Willow. Dogs were creatures of the two legs, unpredictable and often dangerous. She hadn't seen one this small before, though. A wave of protectiveness washed over her. Rusty nudged the pup closer with his nose. "He's hurt, Mama. And hungry." He lapped at the pup's head gently, his own eyes shining with a fierce dedication that tugged at Willow's heart. She crouched down, cautiously extending a paw. The pup flinched, then tentatively licked her. Its tiny tongue was surprisingly rough. "He is just bones," a Willow murmured, her initial surprise melting into concern. Rusty perked up, his tail giving a hopeful twitch. "Can we keep him, Mama? Please? I'll take care of him. I promise." Willow studied Rusty. He looked smaller, younger than she remembered, his earnestness shining through the grime on his fur. He had always been a solitary creature, content in his own company. Now, he was practically radiating affection for this Pip, as he'd called him. She hadn't heard Rusty this animated in a long time. She looked back at the pup, shivering despite Rusty's attempts to warm him. His whimpers were faint, but they echoed in the quiet of the den, stirring something deep within Willow. He was vulnerable, helpless. And Rusty, her Rusty, was already fiercely protective. The decision solidified within her, warm and undeniable. "He can stay," Ishi said, her voice softening. Rusty whooped with joy, nuzzling Willow's head. "Thank you, Mumar. Thank you." Willow watched as Rusty carefully guided Pip to a sheltered corner of the den, lining it with soft leaves and moss. He settled the pup amongst the bedding, curling around him to offer warmth and comfort. Willow settled down next to them, a quiet observer to their budding bond. The pup, nestled against Rusty's side, finally seemed to relax, his whimpers fading into soft, contented sighs. The strange scent of dog still lingered in the air, but now it was mixed with the familiar scent of her son, and a new scent, the scent of family. For the first time in a long time, Willow felt a sense of peace settle over her, a quiet contentment that chased away the lingering shadows of the past. She had a feeling things were about to change, but for now, in the warmth of their den, everything felt right. Learning the ways of the forest. Willow, a mosaic of spots in the filtered sunlight, sank low to the earth. "Hush," as she breathed, her instruction lost in the soughing leaves. She demonstrated the stork, each footfall a study in quietude, her frame a taut bowstring. Let the breeze be your ally, masking your presence. Rusty, eager to please, mirrored her actions, his youthful exuberance threatening to bubble over. Pip, however, emitted a soft whine, his tender leg a constant impediment. Willow shifted her strategy. "Pip, direct pursuit isn't your path. Your nose is your advantage. Breathe deep, little one. Can you discern rabbit on the air?" Pip sniffed, his nostrils flaring. Another frustrated whimper escaped him. Rusty knelt, offering comfort. "Here, let me guide you." He angled his own muzzle in the direction Willow indicated. Picture rabbit's scent. Earthy undertones, the sweetness of grass, sharpened with a thread of ear anxiety. Pip's concentration etched lines onto his small face. He inhaled deeply. This time, his tail gave a tentative thump. "There you go." Willow encouraged. "Rusty, be his legs, help him refine the source." With intuitive understanding, Rusty began a slow, deliberate orbit. Pip, tethered to Rusty's movements, tracked the scent, each adjustment bringing them closer. Finally, Pip let out a soft bark, a single note of triumph. Rusty's gaze, bright with pride, sought Willow's approval. Willow gave a nod. "Excellent. You've located the burrow. Now comes patience." She showed them the art of waiting downwind, the discipline of stillness, the endurance to hold for hours. The vigil proved arduous for Pip. His focus wavered, his stomach growled a protest, and his leg pulsed with discomfort. Rusty kept him engaged, sharing whispered tales of hunts past, mimicking forest sounds, even offering pre-chewed berries, placing them gently in Pip's mouth. As the sun dipped, igniting the sky with streaks of coral and violet, a rabbit finally ventured forth. Willow coiled, poised to strike, yet she stayed her hand, observing Rusty and Pip. This was their trial. Rusty nudged Pip, his gaze locked on the prey. Pip trembled, a conflict of fear and eagerness raging within him. He yearned to chase, to prove his worth, but his leg. Willow saw the battle in his eyes. She knew the chase was beyond him. But that was not the lesson's heart. It was about adaptation, understanding, and the interwoven parts of the forest. It was about belonging. She moved then, a blur of fur and muscle. The rabbit never knew what happened. Barnaby's grumbles. Barnaby's set, a veritable fortress of interwoven tunnels and cozy chambers, carved deep within the embrace of the whispering wood's oldest oak, was his sanctuary. He relished the hushed stillness, the earthy perfume, the blissful absence of, whatever racket was currently assaulting his ears. "Rusty! Easy! You'll crush it." Willow's voice, a piercing scold, sliced through the air. "Crush what?" Barnaby groaned, flipping onto his back in his sleeping alcove. His afternoon nap, a non-negotiable ritual, was under siege by these ear-interlopers. Above, Rusty's clumsy paws blundered about, punctuated by Pip's pathetic whimpers. "I can smell it, Rusty, I can smell it, but reaching it. That blasted leg." Barnaby's ears perked. A crippled limb? He fought down the unwelcome stab of pity. Decades of solitary survival hinged on non-intervention, a policy he wasn't about to abandon. Yet, the clamour. He conjured an image of Rusty, that zealous, if inept, canine, tripping over every conceivable hazard. Pip, no doubt, was blubbering and blundering, leaving an olfactory beacon for every carnivore for leagues. And Willow, with her crisp, incessant directives, amplifying the overall discord. Barnaby levered himself upright, his claws clicking on the compacted earthen floor. Enough. He wasn't an early riser, but neither did he tolerate disruption of his midday slumber. He emerged from his den, squinting against the filtered sunlight. The air hung heavy with the fragrance of pine and damp soil, undercut by the distinctive tang of decaying flesh. He traced the odor, his nose twitching, until he reached Rusty's woefully inadequate excuse for a den, a meager scattering of leaves and branches. Willow knelt beside Pip, who panted raggedly on the ground. Rusty circled them, his tail wagging with tentative enthusiasm. "Honestly, Rusty," a Willow sighed, exasperated, "you're more trouble than you're worth." Barnaby cleared his throat, a harsh rasp that echoed through the trees. "Ahem." The three of them jumped. Willow spun around, her eyes narrowing to slits. Barnaby, as she stated, her tone brittle. "Something amiss?" "Amiss?" Barnaby echoed, affecting innocence. "Hardly. Merely curious if your ensemble plan to audition for the entire forest this afternoon. Some of us value our repose." Pip offered a feeble whimper. Barnaby fixed him with a glare. "That snivelling isn't helping anything. If you're hunting, hunt. If you intend to whine, do so elsewhere." Rusty, ever the optimist, bounded toward him, tail ablare. "Mr. Barnaby, we didn't mean to bother you. Pip hurt his leg, and we're trying to find him something to eat." He proudly presented a mold vole, its fur in disarray. Barnaby's nose wrinkled in distaste. "That looks half-eaten. And undoubtedly riddled with disease. Get rid of it." He surveyed the trio, his face a study in disapproval. "Honestly, this forest is going to the dogs." He paused, then added, as an afterthought, what exactly happened to his leg? The raging storm." The first fat drops splattered onto the parched earth outside the den, hissing like angry snakes. Rusty perked his ears. "Rain," he announced, tail twitching with excitement. "Finally. Pip will feel so much better after a drink." Willow, crouched beside Pip, didn't share his enthusiasm. "Just try not to track mud everywhere when you bring it back, Rusty," as she snapped. Pip whimpered, shifting his weight gingerly on his injured leg. The puppy hadn't eaten properly in days, and his ribs were becoming worryingly prominent beneath his matted fur. The rain intensified, morphing into a torrential downpour within minutes. The wind howled, rattling the branches of the trees overhead like skeletal fingers. Rusty, initially thrilled, started to look uneasy. The ground outside the den was already turning into a muddy swamp. Maybe we should move Pip further back, he suggested, his voice barely audible above the storm. Willow didn't reply, her amber eyes fixed on the entrance. A dark, churning river was beginning to flow inside. Rusty, as she shrieked, her voice laced with panic. The water's coming in. He leaped to his feet, his earlier cheerfulness completely evaporated. Quick! We need to get Pip out of here. He nudged the puppy with his nose, but Pip only whimpered louder, too weak and frightened to move. Willow snarled, an uncharacteristic display of ferocity. Help me lift him, you oaf. Together, they managed to get Pip onto Rusty's back. The Bobcat struggled under the weight of the soaking puppy, the ground slick beneath his paws. The den was rapidly filling with water, swirling around their ankles. They stumbled out into the raging storm. The wind tore at them, and the rain stung their eyes. Rusty could barely see a paw length in front of him. He felt Pip tremble against his fur. Willow! Which way? He shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the wind. Suddenly, a particularly violent gust ripped through the trees, snapping a branch overhead. It crashed down between Rusty and Willow, momentarily separating them. Rusty, panicked, lurched forward, trying to avoid the falling debris. When he looked back, Willow was gone. Willow, he cried again, his voice cracking with fear. He could see nothing but a swirling mass of rain and wind-whipped trees. Pip whimpered, burying his face in Rusty's neck. The puppy was all he had now. He had to find higher ground, and he had to protect Pip. Blindly, he pushed forward, into the heart of the raging storm. A desperate search. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at Rusty's fur as he plunged deeper into the flooded forest. The scent of wet earth and pine needles was overwhelming, masking Pip's already faint, puppy smell. He shifted Pip higher on his back, the little dog a shivering, sodden weight. Pip! Pip, where are you? Rusty roared, his voice barely audible above the storm's fury. He imagined Pip, lost and alone, the image fueling his desperate surge forward. Water surged around his pores, the ground treacherous with hidden roots and fallen branches. He navigated the rising tide with a grim determination, each step a struggle against the unrelenting force of nature. A massive oak, ripped from the earth by the storm, lay across his path. Rusty circled it, searching for a way through. He tested the stability of the exposed roots, slick with mud and rain, before leaping across a gap where the torrent hadn't yet swallowed the space. Panic gnawed at him. How long had he been searching? Time had become a swirling vortex of wind and water. He called out again, his voice cracking with exhaustion. Pip! Here, boy! Only the wind answered. Rusty pressed on, his hope dwindling with each passing moment. Then, above the roar, he heard it. A faint, muffled bark. It was weak, barely a whimper, but unmistakably Pip. He froze, his ears twitching, trying to pinpoint the direction. It came again, a little louder this time, carried on a gust of wind. It was coming from the east, towards the deeper part of the woods, the area closest to the raging river. Rusty plunged forward, his heart pounding with renewed urgency. He pushed through a thicket of thorny bushes, heedless of the scratches tearing at his fur. The undergrowth snagged at his legs, slowing his progress. He could hear Pip's barks more clearly now, a series of desperate yelps. He burst into a small clearing, the ground almost completely submerged. A small, half-submerged bush offered meager shelter. And there, huddled beneath it, was Pip. The little dog whimpered when he saw Rusty, his tail giving a feeble thump against the muddy ground. Relief washed over Rusty, so potent it almost buckled his knees. He waded through the water, scooped Pip into his mouth, and turned back towards the path he blazed, back toward home. The storm still raged, but now, with Pip safe, it felt a little less menacing. Barnaby's change of heart. Barnaby stirred, a low growl rumbling in his chest as the earth trembled. What sounded like a frantic rodent convention had plagued him for far too long. He tried to shut out the world, bunching brittle leaves into makeshift earmuffs, but the clamour persisted, growing nearer. Whatever creature disturbed his slumber was certainly pressing its luck. Exasperated, the badger hauled himself into the cool night. A gaunt bobcat, its coat hanging like tattered flags, was the source of the commotion, its nervous energy radiating in palpable waves. Barnaby observed the spectacle with disdain as the feline rasped, "A Pip! Pip, where are you?" He nearly retreated back into the comforting dark. Such displays of sentimentality grated on his nerves. Yet, a certain desperation tinged the bobcat's plaintive cry, arresting him. He registered the unadulterated fear blazing in those amber eyes, the frantic thrum of its tail. This was no mere fit of pique, but genuine agony. "Mislaid something, have you?" Barnaby rumbled, his voice a gravelly rasp. The bobcat spun around, a jolt of surprise evident in its posture. "Have you seen him? A small, or a very small dog?" "He's gone. I can't seem to locate him," the feline stammered, voice cracking with anxiety. Barnaby shifted his weight, paws scraping against the earth. He hadn't encountered any canines, diminutive or otherwise. However, he possessed intimate knowledge of these woods. Every twist of root, every hidden burrow was etched into his memory. He sensed the secrets whispered by the soil itself. Could be below, Barnaby offered, his gaze settling on a thorny thicket. Old rabbit warren, bit unstable. Creature your size could easily take a tumble. Hope flared in the bobcat's eyes. "Could you, or would you show me?" Barnaby hesitated. Altruism was hardly his defining characteristic. He relished solitude, the quiet pulse of the earth beneath his feet. But the bobcat's image, etched with worry, held him captive. "Fine," he conceded, a grumble escaping his throat. "Stay close. And stifle the dramatics." Leading the way, he parted the curtain of brambles, revealing a tight moor in the earth. The bobcat, who introduced himself as Rusty, shadowed his every move, practically vibrating with dread. The tunnel pressed in on them, heavy with the aroma of damp earth and decay. Barnaby navigated the passage with innate grace, his powerful claws finding purchase in the earthen walls. Rusty, struggling to keep up, panted as though he had run for miles. After what felt like an eternity spent underground, Barnaby halted. "Listen," he commanded, cocking his head. A faint, muffled whimper drifted through the tunnel. "Pip!" Rusty shouted, his voice infused with newfound hope. He surged ahead, squeezing past Barnaby and vanishing around a bend. A moment later, a joyful yap echoed, followed by Rusty's sigh of pure relief. Rusty reappeared, a miniature, shivering puppy nestled carefully in his forelegs. Pip, the tiny pup, slobbered kisses on Rusty's muzzle, his tail beating a weak tattoo against Rusty's chest. Rusty looked at Barnaby, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Thank you," he choked out, emotion thick in his voice. "Thank you, Barnaby. I wouldn't have known what to do." Barnaby simply grunted, experiencing an unfamiliar wave of discomfort in the face of such raw gratitude. "Just go. Now scram out of my tunnels." He turned away, his gait heavy as he retraced his steps, leaving Rusty and Pip to find their own way back to the surface. One thing was certain in the badger's mind. Tranquility in his set was now a distant memory. A new family. Rusty's heart hammered against his ribs as Barnaby grunted, shoving his broad claws into the rotting wood of the fallen log. Pip's faint whimper spurred him on. The badger finally splintered a section away, revealing a dark, narrow hollow. "He's in there." Rusty yelped, nearly tripping over Barnaby in his eagerness. Barnaby huffed. "Course he is. Now, stand back before I cave the whole thing in." He carefully widened the opening, then, with surprising gentleness, reached inside. A moment later, he pulled Pip out, a shivering ball of fur. Rusty snatched Pip into his paws, burying his face in the puppy's matted fur. "Pip! Oh, Pip, you're safe." Pip licked Rusty's nose weakly, his tail giving a feeble thump against Rusty's chest. Barnaby watched them, a strange softness flickering in his usually grumpy eyes. "All right, enough of the waterworks. Pup's cold. Needs a warm place to sleep." He turned and lumbered towards the overgrown thicket at the edge of the clearing. "Follow me." Got a spare burrow that's seen better days, but it's shelter. The burrow was surprisingly spacious inside, a network of tunnels and chambers. One chamber, however, was damp and partially collapsed. "This one's the driest, but needs work," a Barnaby grumbled, already nudging loose dirt with his snout. Rusty laid Pip down on a bed of dry leaves in the corner. "We can fix it. We will fix it." He started gathering more leaves and twigs, his earlier anxiety replaced with a fierce determination. Barnaby watched him for a moment, then sighed. "Fine. But you're doing it properly. No flimsy nonsense." And with that, the badger began instructing Rusty on the finer points of burrow construction, reinforcing the walls with interwoven branches, redirecting water flow with strategically placed stones, and creating a proper ventilation system. Pip, nestled in the leaves, watched their efforts with tired eyes. Days blurred into a rhythm of gathering, digging, and building. Rusty, fueled by worry for Pip and a burgeoning sense of responsibility, worked tirelessly. Barnaby, despite his gruff exterior, proved to be an invaluable teacher and an unexpectedly dedicated housemate. He showed Rusty where to find the best clay for sealing cracks and the sturdiest roots for supporting the roof. He even shared his stash of dried berries with Pip, who was slowly regaining his strength. One evening, as Rusty and Barnaby were patching a particularly stubborn hole, Pip suddenly perked up, his ears twitching. He let out a sharp, insistent bark, a sound stronger than Rusty had heard from him before. Barnaby froze, his nose twitching. "Fox," he growled, confirming Rusty's own dawning realization. "Close by." Rusty immediately ushered Pip deeper into the burrow. Barnaby positioned himself at the entrance, a formidable barrier of claws and teeth. Rusty peeked out, his heart pounding, ready to defend his new family.